Welcome back to the Off the Ball podcast. I'm your host, Clay Tillman, and on today's episode, we are going to be breaking down the Eagles versus Rams game from last night, and also we're going to do a preview of the Ravens versus Chargers game tonight. So before we get into the Chargers versus Ravens game, let's start with this Eagles versus Rams brawl, where the Eagles win 37-20 in a historic night for a running back who is or should be in talks of a potential MVP. But before we get into who that is, obviously, if you know the Eagles, you already know who I'm talking about. But before we get into that, let's jump right into the box score of the Eagles. So Jalen Hurts was 15 for 22, 179 yards and one touchdown. Saquon Barkley had the game of his life. 26 carries, 255 rushing yards, 9.8 yards per carry. That's almost a first down, pretty much a first down every single time he got the ball, and 2 touchdowns. He had a historic night for not only the franchise, but as a player, and he stole the show. And this is where I get into, should Saquon Barkley be or should Saquon Barkley be in talks for an MVP? Yes, obviously yes. For what he has done so far this season, yes. The thing is, there hasn't been a single running back who has gotten an MVP award since Adrian Peterson in 2012. But we'll get more into that in a second. Let's continue with the box score. Kenneth Gainwell, 5 carries, 22 yards, 1 touchdown. And then A.J. Brown continues to slay over in Philadelphia. 6 receptions, 109 yards, and 1 touchdown. So Saquon Barkley MVP. Well, he had a career high in scrimmage yards, 302 of them. He had a record of 255 rushing yards, and that set an entire franchise record, shattered that. He had 2 70-plus yard touchdowns last night. This season, he's had 3 games with 195 scrimmage yards, and that matches the same as the entire NFL. It continues. It definitely continues. He's the 3rd player ever with 1,500 scrimmage yards and 10 touchdowns in his first season with multiple franchises. Also, he could be the first MVP since Adrian Peterson in 2012. But back to the 1,500 scrimmage yards and 10 touchdowns, well, nobody has done this since Marshall Faulk and Eric Dickerson, who are both Hall of Fame running backs. He is playing at a Hall of Fame level. He's playing at an All-Pro level. He's playing at an MVP level, which should guarantee him it. I mean, he's playing out of his dang mind. It's unbelievable. I mean, the people that could be MVP, Lamar, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Jared Goff. But, dude, it's about time we give it to another position. And this year, it really looks like it could be Saquon Barkley. At this point in time, I do think Josh Allen is very valuable. But I think Saquon is a little bit more valuable than any other player in the league. It's just been an absolute masterclass from him. It's been incredible. He comes from a starving team in the New York Giants who didn't pay him, who paid a guy they shouldn't have paid in Daniel Jones, who recently got benched and actually cut from the team. So that was a waste of money. But they get rid of their best player who carried them for 4 or 5 years. He was injury prone over there, but when he was healthy, man, he carried them. He's carrying this Eagles team. I wouldn't say carry. He's helping them out a lot. This is what I like about the Eagles. Their O-line is very, very good. And what makes Saquon Barkley look so good is how well their O-line has been. They're allowing Saquon to find holes, to get chunk yardage. And he's shown that. And I'm not neglecting Saquon Barkley's talent. I'm praising it. I think he's a very talented running back. He's one of the best running backs we've seen in a while. And we look at New York and what he did there. They didn't have the best O-line. He was able to do great stuff over there. But now that they have a great O-line, dude, he's on pace to break the touchdown record. I'm not the touchdown record. The rushing yard record, which right now is held by Eric Dickerson, which would be unbelievable. 2,000 yards. 2,000 plus yards. I forget the specific number, but it's past 2,000 yards. Derrick Henry has done it. And believe it or not, Saquon Barkley could do it this year. If he continues to play at the pace he's doing, then he sure well might break the record. And he sure well might be an MVP. And I believe he deserves it. I also think Josh Allen deserves it. The fact that he's been balling with little weapons on the wide receiver end. But Saquon, man, has really helped this Eagles team. And they've won about like 6 or 7 games in a row. 6 or 7 games in a row, I forget. But he's helped them through every single game. It's because he's healthy. It's because his O-line's doing great. And it's because he's playing at an MVP level. Nobody's doing it. Derrick Henry was doing it. He kind of died down a little. Doesn't have as many attempts anymore as Saquon Barkley's getting. I mean, Saquon Barkley had 26 attempts on 9.8 yards per carry. Unbelievable. Unbelievable stuff from him. The defense for the Eagles, so they allowed 117 yards in the first 2 drives. So at the beginning, it looked like, okay, this game's going to be interesting. I mean, the Eagles defense was crashing. As it says on the stat board, 117 yards in the first 2 drives. But, oh, how the tables turn. The Eagles allowed -6 yards in the remainder of the half. In the second quarter, they allowed -6 yards, which really boosted them to this 17-point victory, especially in the first half. Puka Nacua had a good game, and we'll get to that box score in a second, but Puka Nacua had a good game. Cooper Kupp had a good game. It's not that the Rams did bad. It's just this defense really turned up in the second quarter of the game and really put it away. And Saquon Barkley was a huge reason for that win last night. But they also had 5 sacks on 11 QB hits. So they did excellent in the second half and in that second quarter. First quarter, atrocious. Moving forward, they need to clamp more all 4 quarters when it comes to the postseason. Yes, you're going to have to play pretty dang well football. Rarely many mistakes because you start your record 0-0. You have 3 or more games to make the Super Bowl. So any team can shine. And this is where it gets to the point where you're going to have to play perfect ball. You really are. And if you don't, you're going to lose. As a Packers fan, I've seen it for many years. I mean, you can see, look at that. I'm a huge Packers fan. And there would be times where we would be the best team in the league and we blow it in the NFC Championship. Why? It's because we don't play good in all 4 quarters. We may play good in the first half and bad in the second, bad in the first, great in the second. You have to play 4 great quarters of football for you to be a successful team and for you to make the Super Bowl and potentially win it. But if Saquon stays healthy, if this O-line does what they're doing, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, once he comes back, Jalen Hurts, their defense, man, this team is a contender. They really are. It's going to be a Lions, my opinion, a Lions-Eagles NFC Championship. I mean, who's going to blink and not see it happen? Because it most likely will. These are the two most competitive teams in the whole NFC. Besides, you have the Packers, you have the Commanders, you have the Falcons, but those teams aren't powerhouse studs like a 10-1 Lions and a 2-loss Eagles team. They aren't. They don't have as good of a defense, and they don't have good as an offense. So I don't see any other two teams making the NFC Championship except the Lions and the Eagles. But next week is when we really see, or potentially see, who's hiding underneath the Eagles mascot. Because they play the hardest team probably this whole year, and that's the Baltimore Ravens. You got the Ravens next year. This could be a Super Bowl preview. I think it's going to be Ravens-Lions, but heck, it could be Ravens-Eagles. And it's going to be, they're going to put them to the test. Run game from the Eagles is excellent. Their defense isn't as good. Pass game is really good. So it's going to be a test to how well will the Eagles prevent Henry from doing anything, and the pass game and Lamar Jackson getting out of the pocket. How well can they put pressure on Lamar Jackson? So we're going to have to see what the Eagles can do against probably their best opponent this season. And Eagles are on some sort of momentum right now. 7-game winning streak. I just read it in my notes right here. I said 6-7. So it's now confirmed. A 7-game winning streak. Can this momentum last? And can they carry it on for the remainder of the season? And this is the game to see if they could possibly do so. But that's it for the Eagles. Once again, Saquon Barkley, unbelievable, incredible. My offensive player of the year and potentially an MVP. Let's move on to the Rams. So Matthew Stafford, 24 for 36, 243 yards, 2 touchdowns. Kyron Williams, the running back, 16 carries, 72 yards, 1 touchdown. Cooper Kupp had 8 receptions, 60 yards, 1 touchdown. And Demarcus Robinson, 2 receptions, 15 yards, 1 touchdown. Puka Nacua also had a great game, didn't have a touchdown, but he was their leading receiver. And one thing I have a problem with the Rams, they're now 5-6. The good thing is the NFC West is so close. It is tighter than ever. One thing the Rams lack is consistency. They had the Pats last week in Week 10. Well, I'm sorry, Week 10? It might have been last week. I don't know. I can't remember the weeks. Week 11, Week 12. I can't remember the weeks. But it's Week 12. So last week in Week 11, my bad, guys. In Week 11, they played against the Pats, and they scored 28 points against them. In this game, they are 2 for 4 from the red zone, and they're 0 for 8 on third down. It was dirty ball from them from the head start. They had a touchdown in the first quarter for the second time this whole season. And like I said, in the second quarter, they had a negative 6 yards. And it's the lowest in any quarter since 2019 from the Rams. So this is where I say lack of consistency. One, because they blew out the Pats. And I think the reason for this, it's not necessarily that they're doing something terrible. I mean, they went up against a Pats team who's garbage, who's absolutely this terrible. Then you go up against a Eagles team who's a legit contender. So I'm not pushing them or throwing them under the bus. I'm just not seeing any consistency from them. It's a loss-win, loss-win, loss-win type of week. There's no consistency. Not at all. They were bad on third down. They weren't good whatsoever. In the red zone, they were 50%. And they just had a terrible second quarter. So they're now 5-6. The good thing is, here's the good thing. In their division, I just said this a second ago, in their division, they have Seattle, they have Arizona, they have San Fran, and then them. Well, the Seahawks are 6-5. Same with the Arizona Cardinals, 6-5. The 49ers, after the loss against Green Bay yesterday, they're now 5-6. Same with the Rams. So the Rams are one game out of being number one in their division. So it's anyone's ball game. And the remaining next week, here's the schedule for the NFC West. Seattle goes to the Jets. That should be an easy win. Arizona plays Vikings. I think Vikings take that. LA plays Saints. I think Rams take that. And San Fran plays Bills. San Fran, after yesterday against the Packers, were terrible. Brock Purdy was out. Nick Bosa, Trent Williams. So a lot of injuries are going on with the San Francisco 49ers, but I'm not saying that it was because of that reason. They've been pretty bad this whole season. After coming off a Super Bowl, they've looked atrocious. Christian McCaffrey hasn't been the same. Obviously, injuries. Brandon Ayuk, they paid him a lot of money for what reason? They should have moved off Deebo Samuel, had some cap space. But at this point, at 5-6, you might as well just want to take a top 10 draft pick. You might as well just want to get a big draft pick to help y'all out next season. Because good luck coming back from a 5-6. I mean, you could do it, but you're not going to be a Super Bowl team. You may be a first-round bounce. And honestly, that might be what they need. They might need to be shoved in the face a little, to be slapped around. I mean, Kyle Shanahan's a great coach. They've been to the Super Bowl the past 5 years, twice. Maybe they need a little slap in the face to show, hey, we aren't perfect. We aren't perfect. We have flaws. And then they're going to go try and pay Brock Purdy. Now, what should you say? Should we wait a little? Should we pay him that bag? I think Brock Purdy's an excellent QB. Mr. Irrelevant. But you have guys like George Kittle. You have guys like Nick Bosa, Trent Williams, who are future Hall of Famers. You have Fred Warner. You have all these great players, and you're not doing good. So there's obviously a problem. And that could be on the wide receiver end. That could be the defense. And I think a lot of it has to do with a bunch of injuries and just a lot of inconsistency. But LA still has a chance to get into the playoffs. And it's a matter of time to see them make the playoffs after last season. And I mean, they won the Super Bowl against the Bengals a few years ago. So this Rams team is talented. I'm not saying they're bad. I think they have a great coaching staff in Sean McVay. They have a good offense in Matt Stafford, who has a couple years left, Kyron Williams, who's young, and then a great wide receiver duo in Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp, a young defense. So they're honestly, I don't know, I wouldn't say they're in a rebuilding mode because they aren't, but they just struggled. And I think a lot of that has to do with their lack of consistency. But they're in a very tight division. It can go either way. Any team could honestly win this division. I'm honestly excited. I mean, we have 6 weeks left of the NFL, and this is incredible. This is awesome. This is a great division to look out for in the upcoming weeks. But, yeah. And then in last night's game, one of the biggest holes from the Rams was obviously their defense. I mean, they let Saquon Barkley have a historic night. But coming into the game, they honestly aren't a great defense. Total defense are 23rd in the league. and they're also 18th in rush D. So coming into this game, it was right off the bat, it was a challenge to keep Saquon Barkley from doing anything. Well, he did everything pretty much. So they failed on that end. So rush defense was bad. And that's the biggest hole, I think, is because they couldn't stop Saquon Barkley from rushing 255 yards on 305 scrimmage yards and 2 touchdowns. So it was crazy. And then on the other side of the ball, I think it was bad protection from the Rams overall. And I think that's one thing that they need to get better at, because one, the O-line has struggled with injuries. Their tackle, Rob Havenstein, has been out. He should be back next week, hopefully. He's a great tackle, but they were not sacked against the Pats last week. And then coming in this game, they were sacked. Matthew Stafford was sacked 5 times on 11 QB hits. So like I said, hopefully Havenstein will be back, their tackle, for next week against the Saints. If not, he's projected to be back sometime before week 14. So 1-2 more weeks. We'll see. But that is the end of the breakdown of last night's game. Let's move on to the preview of the Ravens versus Chargers game. This one will be very interesting in my opinion. Chargers on a 4-game winning streak, and Ravens just lost to the Steelers, who didn't score a touchdown. 5 field goals. Chris Boswell. MVP, baby. Let's start off with the Ravens and talk about the offense. So in week 11 versus the Steelers, they had 16 points, and they were terrible on third down. They were 4-for-11 on third down. This season in total, they've averaged a little over 30 points per game, which lands them second on the rankings for offensive points in the league. And that's obviously a problem. You're going up against a division rival who's currently leading your division, which is unbelievable to me. But I don't think that'll happen for too much longer. I think this Ravens team will win their division. But Steelers are having a heck of a season. What was I saying? Yeah. So they did not do well against the Steelers. Had 16 points, while the Steelers kicked 5 field goals and just blew, or was it 5 or 6 field goals? I forget. But on the other hand, what the Ravens do have is a run game. And I mean a run game. Not on the running back end, not just that, but on the quarterback end, you have Lamar Jackson. And on the running back end, you have Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry this season, in week 11, I know Saquon Barkley has just passed them in rushing yards. But before Saquon Barkley's game last night, Derrick Henry was first in touchdowns, which I believe he's still. He's now second in rushing yards, but as of 2 nights ago, he was first with 1,185 yards on 6 yards per carry. And in week 11, last week, he had 13 attempts, 65 yards, 5 yards per carry, and a touchdown. I don't think they're giving the ball to him enough. We've seen what Derrick Henry can do this season, what he's done his whole career. He's a monster. I think against this Chargers team, who's looked great defensively, one of the best defenses in the league, they're going to have to give it to Derrick Henry as much as possible. And if that doesn't work, they're going to have to use they're going to have to put it through the air. Lamar Jackson's going to have to put it through the air. And last week, Lamar Jackson on the ground, 4 attempts, 46 yards, 11.5 yards per carry, and in the air, 207 yards, 1 touchdown, an interception, but his rate was bad, 66, a little over 66 QBR. And here's a stat. It was his first sub 100 QBR since week 2. So other than that, he's been playing incredible. And against the Steelers, they definitely stopped him. Lamar Jackson's 3 finished games with a sub 90 rate has equaled in a loss. So when Lamar Jackson does not have a QBR over 90, they have lost. So Lamar Jackson, this is what makes Lamar Jackson valuable. And this is why he's in the talks for most valuable player. Is because when he's not on his A game, his team stinks. When he is on his A game, man, his team shines. And that's what makes him so valuable. He can get the ball through the air. He can run. He's a Michael Vick on steroids. He legitimately is. He's a generational talent. He's a lot better than Michael Vick. I'm not even comparing him to him. I mean, they have some sort of a comparison in their run game and how mobile they are. But Lamar Jackson's a one of one. He's a potential 3-time MVP. He has already won 2 of them. He needs that Super Bowl. This could be the year. But if he doesn't perform to a top tier ability, then they won't perform well. Derrick Henry ain't going to carry them. He ain't a Saquon Barkley. So Lamar Jackson will have to play a great game against this Chargers team to potentially win. Chargers are a great team. Like I said, 4 straight wins in a row. So it should be exciting. Here are some notable receivers from week 11. Zay Flowers, 6 targets, 2 receptions, 39 yards, 1 touchdown. And then their leading receiver was Isaiah Likely, 5 targets, 4 receptions, 75 yards. Now let's move on to the Ravens defense. So in week 11 versus the Steelers, obviously they allowed them to 18 points, 4 for 16 on third down. They did an excellent job. And this season, they are 22nd in points per game, allowed points per game, 24.6 points per game allowed. So they've done they haven't done the best job in that because they've allowed almost 25 points per game. But their offense is so great that it hasn't been a serious problem for them. Week 11, their pass defense, they allowed 205 yards on 1 interception and a 67.5 QBR. And this whole season, they are 23rd in QBR allowed, and that's a 99 QBR. Their pass rush in week 11, they had 4 sacks on 36 pass attempts. And this season, they are tied 3rd in total sacks with 35 of them. So they have some good sackers or some pass rushers on their team who have done very, very well. They are tied 3rd in most sacks. And then their week 11 rush defense, 34 attempts, 122 yards, almost 4 yards per carry. And this season, they are 2nd in yards per carry allowed, which is a little under 3.5 yards per carry. So that's the Ravens. That's their offensive defense from last week. Let's move on to the Chargers. Like I've said for the 3rd time, 4-game winning streak. They're on a roll. Let's move on to the offense. So they've had 4 straight games with 26 plus points. In week 11, they had 34 points, 435 offensive yards. In week 11, Justin Herbert versus the Bengals had 297 passing yards on 2 touchdowns and a 94.3 passer rating or QBR. QBR. And Justin Herbert has been phenomenal this season. I think he's been one of the most underrated QBs this season. There hasn't been a lot of talks of Justin Herbert potentially being a Pro Bowler. But this team is a legitimate contender for a wild card position in the AFC. They've had 4 of their last 5 games. They've had 275 plus yards offensively, or Justin Herbert through the air. Ladd McConkey in week 11 had a great game, 9 targets, 6 receptions, 123 yards. He has been phenomenal. In 4 straight games, he's had 50-plus receiving yards. He's a great rookie. He's someone, I said this last week in the podcast, it's probably Herbert's most reliable guy offensively when it comes to a wide receiver. He's potentially going to be a future star in this league. I think he's great. But Quentin Johnston also had a good game. 8 targets, 2 receptions, 48 yards, and 1 TD. And he's had a touchdown in 3 straight games as well. Will Dissly kind of had a game of his of the season. He's been kind of quiet through the other weeks, but in this week he probably had the best game of his of the season. 6 targets, 4 receptions, 80 yards, and a touchdown. And then J.K. Dobbins also had a fantastic game when it comes to getting touchdowns. 11 attempts, 56 yards, 5 yards per carry on 2 TDs. And Justin Herbert was also a monster on the ground. We really saw him carry the ball. 5 attempts, 65 yards on 13 yards per carry. So this offense, obviously, according to these stats, is rolling. It's a big reason why they are on their 4th game, on a 4-game winning streak. And a lot of that has to do with the balance they have between their offense and their defense and Jim Harbaugh in general. I think Jim Harbaugh is a great coach. Just got off winning a national championship with Michigan, comes to the NFL, goes on a good team with a good run, a good quarterback in Justin Herbert. They are paired well. I think Jim Harbaugh is working very well with Justin Herbert, building around them, and they're now looking like a potential not Super Bowl contender in any means, but in the near future, once they continue to build chemistry and get their act together, and their coaching staff just continues to develop in chemistry and all that sort of stuff, they're a potential, I'd say in the next 5 years, a potential Super Bowl contender. I can't wait to see it. I think Justin Herbert's a great quarterback. I have him on my fantasy, but I like the guy. I think he's fun. He's a great dude. He's great at the game of football. He's fun to watch. Very fun to watch. This Chargers team is exciting. So tonight, it's going to be a battle of the Harbaughs, which will be very fun. But I think it's going to be a good game offensively. We'll have to wait and see. But hey, the offense isn't just good. The defense has actually been very well this season. They are first in points allowed, 14.5 points per game, and they are second on 3rd down conversions. In Week 11, they allowed 27 points against the Bengals, which was a bad performance. They were killing them, and in the second half, the Bengals really just tore it up and tied it in the 4th quarter. But on 3rd down, they did great. Bengals were only 5 for 17 on 3rd down. Their pass defense allowed 356 yards, 3 touchdowns, so honestly wasn't the best. And this season, they've allowed a little over 82.5 passer rating, which makes them 9th in the NFL. The rush defense in Week 11, they allowed 110 yards on 25 attempts on 4.4 yards per carry. So this season, the yards per carry mark is 4.6 yards per carry. So they averaged a little under that on 4.4 yards per carry. So they didn't do the worst. And then the pass defense did pretty well. They had 3 sacks on 50 pass attempts. And this season, they've sacked 34 times. Their defense have sacked 34 times on the quarterback. And that has led them to be tied fifth on the rankings for sacks. And then, like I said, this is a battle of the Harbaughs. Last time these two met, John Harbaugh with the Ravens and Jim Harbaugh, who was formerly on the 49ers. It was in Super Bowl 47 when the Ravens won that against Kaepernick, and Joe Flacco took a ring home, or took the trophy home as well. But this is the Harbaughs Part 3. So we'll have to wait and see what happens tonight. I'm excited to watch it. It's going to be a great game offensively, I think. If I had to predict a score, I think it's going to be close. I'm going to say Ravens 27-24. It's going to be a heck of an offensive game, in my opinion. I think Derrick Henry will have a great game. I think Lamar Jackson will have a good game. We'll see what this Chargers defense can do. If they can stop them, I'll tell you what. If the Chargers defense can stop Lamar Jackson, obviously they're going to win. We see it from the stats when Lamar Jackson has a sub 90 QBR. They've lost 3 of the times that Lamar Jackson has had a sub 90 passer or QBR. So if that happens, I think Chargers win. But I think it's going to be 27-24 Ravens. We'll see what happens. But I hope y'all enjoyed. If y'all did, make sure to follow all my social medias and also follow the podcast. You can go to my socials on TikTok, Off the Ball with Clay Tillman. Same with my Twitter and Instagram, where I post my reels and updates on my podcasts. Also, continue to rate the podcast and share it. I love everybody's just love and comments on all my socials. It's been amazing stuff. So thank y'all for listening, and I'll see you next time on the Off the Ball podcast. Have a good day.